So just as a starting point, First Affirmative started doing SRI in 1988. We began to host this conference in 1990. Of course, an original seminal event for us was the Exxon Valdez running aground. That happened shortly after we got involved in SRI. For us, especially as relates to climate, we were one of the first firms that got involved in fossil fuel-free investing. Right now, about 25% of our assets are fossil fuel-free, and probably one of the most common things that new clients ask for us. So from a climate standpoint, we've seen incredible growth of interest over the last 5 to 7 years in that. So,
yeah. I think divestment is actually a very important issue, one of my topics, because I feel that it's going begging. There is a great opportunity for one of the great universities to claim the high ground and take a real stand against the unethical behavior of the fossil fuel industry. And if they did, I think it would help. It would help them get some of the best new students. It would be a competitive advantage and a very lasting one. And they will do it. Sooner or later, they will divest. So why not do it first and best and turn it into a real asset?
Yeah.
I wish they would wake up.
Yeah. We have a group of students here, scholars in college. Actually, their meeting is going on right now and talking about various student programs on campuses. I look forward to hearing what they say about divestment in their college programs.
And I have some pretty interesting stuff that I'll be covering today that should have been done long ago, and finally I got irritated enough to do it. And we looked at what happened if you took out of the S&P 10 industry groups, totaling the whole S&P. And we took them out for 30 years and we found that they all looked the same. The 90% that remained, the 9 buckets of 90% all had, roughly speaking, the same performance, plus or minus a ridiculous 25 basis points. And I had a guilty conscience because I thought we must have been lucky with the data period. But I presented it anyway since I'm ruthless. And then my conscience nagging me, we went back and we did 1955 onwards, and then finally 1925, which took a lot of work. And what we found was that the gap of actually 30 basis points plus or minus had I like to joke, exploded to 35. There was really no material difference.
What did it do to the risk side?
Well, it does nothing to the risk side to a long-term holder. It will cause a little deviation from the S&P if you consider that risk. But in terms of the absolute deviation of each of the 10 streams, 1 or 2 of them are a little bit riskier than the S&P, and some of them are less risky. It's all trivial to a long-term holder. So you can really say the price of your ethics over many decades is 1/4 of a point, plus or minus. And it's just as likely to be positive as it is to be negative. So if you took out the whole oil industry since 1925, it makes no difference. If you took it out for the last 30 years, you made a few basis points. So step 1, every investment committee that I have ever met, who are the most conservative people on the planet, they will tell you if you cough that everything is ruined.
Right.
But it's an old wives' tale. Actually, in this case, an old husband's tale, since they are 90% men.
Yeah.
And it's just not true. So put a price on your ethics. And actually, looking forward, there's a very strong case that this will be the exception to the rule. Because there's every reason to think that there are forces at work distorting the normal market efficiency. So the market has been brilliantly efficient in the last 80 years. in that it prices each major industry group about the same and gets it right. Who knew it could do anything efficiently, the market? But it's done this efficiently. But in the future, what is the case that it might miss the point on oil? The case is that this is the first industry that has been deliberately confused and misled by a well-funded program for the last 30 years. They have deliberately underplayed the effect of climate change.
Right.
And as the truth comes out, there will be carbon taxes around the world, and there will be a big push on electrification in a green way, and so on, and electric cars. And they run a very, very high risk of stranded assets.
So we failed our first attempt for pricing carbon in the United States. We had people from the Carbon Exchange spoke at our conference in 2007, and that whole effort didn't work. I know that in other countries there have been some more success in putting a price on carbon. What direction do you see that going then?
I think it's disappointingly slow and absolutely inevitable. So of course everybody is going to have a carbon tax one day, even the US. In fact, we do have a small carbon tax on gasoline. The carbon tax to get the job done has to be fairly high and has to grow over time. But let me point out something almost nobody knows. When you go to Europe and you fill up your tank, the tax on gasoline is equivalent to $400 a ton. And trust me, that has not stopped Paris or London from having traffic jams. Everybody drives to work just the same. Everyone clogs up the road, but they do it in cars that get twice the mileage of the giant SUVs that clog Beacon Hill in Boston.
So we buy carbon credits so that this event is carbon neutral. And to me, it was astonishingly inexpensive. And I don't know whether you think carbon credits for that type of a process are worth the effort or just a stopgap.
They're a stopgap, and they are worth the effort. Everything is worth the effort. This is really a desperate race that we're in. And I don't have to think it's the optimal strategy to think it's a good idea. Everybody's effort to improve anything in this area is worth it.
Okay. So we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, it sounds like.
On the other hand, I don't mind telling people that they are missing the central point. And I fully intend to today. Because my view of this is all philanthropy is useful. Giving money to your college is useful. But your colleges will not matter if we don't settle climate change. Society as we know it will not be stable and successful in as little as 50 years if we let this get away. Business as usual will ruin the world that we have become accustomed to. And it's almost guaranteed. We have to act. And all the money you spend on the arts and health even, and everything else will come to nothing if we don't get climate change right. To that end, I stopped giving to the business school and everything else. All valuable in their own ways, but they're not on the right horizon. This has such a short horizon, climate change.
Certainly the most recent projections to come out, I assume that's in your presentation today, of it's not out there in the future anymore. It's day after tomorrow kind of stuff.
And talking about the day after tomorrow, there is one out today. Nature today has a really breathtaking step in the right direction. And that is an article that says that the IPCC, whose report rattled so many cages recently, has way underestimated still the rate at which the oceans are rising in temperature. The ocean has absorbed 90% of all the heat. And the ocean temperature has risen 60% faster since '95 than the IPCC have just reported this month. Mm-hmm. So this is ringing a lot of bells now. This is not happening slowly. This is happening at breakneck speed. The water warming rate since '95 is triple the rate of the prior 30, 40 years. Triple the rate in just 3 decades. I mean, this is getting to be very creepy.
So from an investment standpoint, do you see the activity as divestment, proactive investment, or shareholder advocacy as, or do you see it as all three are necessary to make change? Because this is an activist group that comes to this event. They want to know what they should do.
As individuals, they should do everything they can. We know the long list of green behaviors. At the top of that list of light bulbs and so on is eat much less meat. That's huge. And then trumping that by far is take less jet flights to Colorado Springs. Do not think I don't have a guilty conscience. I do have a guilty conscience. Mm-hmm. If I didn't think there was a reasonable chance of offsetting that by persuading a few people, I wouldn't be here. But we should be thinking about conferences where mostly it's on video. We really have to. Mm-hmm. So you should have a guilty conscience too. So that is far worse. One less transatlantic flight will offset everything else you do except one thing that trumps even jet flights, and that is having one less child. One less child, of course, is their carbon footprint and their progeny forever. And that is a monster. Of everything you ever do, 80, 90% would be the decision to have one less child.